I never imagined that at 68 years old, I'd be lying in a hospital bed, faking unconsciousness, only to hear my own son whisper, "This is the last breath you'll take, old man." He said it while disconnecting my oxygen tube with his own hands, trying to kill me for my money. My name is Vernon Sterling, and what I'm about to tell you forever changed my perspective on family, loyalty, and the true value of the people we think we know. For 68 years, I built a life I believed was solid. A successful company, Sterling Development Group, which I started brick by brick when I was 25. A wonderful wife, Carol, my faithful partner for 4 decades, and 2 children I thought were my greatest pride. Valerie, my 39-year-old daughter, was always independent and hardworking. From a young age, she showed strong character and solid principles. She moved to Atlanta, Georgia, 15 years ago to develop her career as an architect, visiting us faithfully every month and maintaining constant contact. She never asked me for a loan or showed excessive interest in the family business. Henry, on the other hand, was always different. In his 30s, married to Denise for 10 years. He never managed to establish himself professionally on his own. He worked sporadically for the family company, but without any real commitment or responsibility. His constant job hopping and failed ventures worried me, though I always justified his behavior, thinking he would eventually mature. On March 10th, 2024, I was admitted to County General Hospital with severe pneumonia. The doctors explained that my age complicated the situation, requiring a lengthy hospitalization and continuous supplemental oxygen. During the first few days, both Henry and Denise seemed genuinely concerned, visiting daily and offering constant help. However, something began to trouble me. Henry's questions became strangely specific and persistent. He wasn't asking so much about my health as he was about documents, bank PINs, the location of important papers, and details about my will. "Dad, where do you keep the bank documents? Is the will up to date? Who has the keys to the company?" Initially, I interpreted these questions as the natural worry of a son facing my delicate condition. I thought he wanted to be prepared to help in case of an emergency. I was even touched to see my son seemingly so involved and responsible for the first time in years. But there was something in his tone, in the insistence, in the way his eyes lit up when he mentioned figures or important documents. Denise also actively participated in these conversations, making mental notes of every detail I shared. Their knowing glances, when they thought I wasn't watching, started to give me a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Dr. Charles Owens, my primary care physician, was optimistic about my recovery, but he emphasized the importance of absolute rest and continuous oxygen. "Mr. Sterling, your body is responding well to treatment, but you must avoid any stress or shock. The oxygen is vital for your full recovery," he explained during his morning rounds. During those initial days while connected to the oxygen machine, I began to observe the behavior of those around me more closely. Carol, my wife, showed genuine maternal concern, bringing me home-cooked food and keeping me informed about minor household matters. Her tears, when the doctors explained my condition, were authentic. They came from the heart. Valerie called from Atlanta 3 times a day, always asking for specific medical details and offering to fly out immediately if necessary. "Dad, how are your oxygen levels? Have the doctors changed the treatment? I can catch the first flight tomorrow," she'd say, her voice cracking with worry and distance. Henry and Denise, however, seemed more interested in material things than in my actual well-being. Their conversations systematically drifted toward financial topics, property, and the future of the company. When they mentioned my health, it sounded rehearsed, artificial, as if they were following a social protocol instead of expressing genuine feelings. On the 4th day of my hospitalization, something definitively changed my perspective. The early morning of March 14th changed my life forever. It was around 3:15 a.m. when I heard stealthy footsteps approaching my room. The sedatives I had been given to help me rest kept me in a state of drowsiness, but my mind remained partially alert. I immediately recognized Henry's silhouette cautiously entering through the slightly open door. He moved with calculated precision, as if he had rehearsed every motion beforehand. The faint hallway light cast unsettling shadows over his face, revealing an expression I had never seen on my son. Cold, determined, and completely devoid of any trace of filial love. My survival instinct immediately kicked in. Something about his demeanor alerted me to imminent danger. I decided to keep my eyes closed and control my breathing, pretending to be deeply sedated. It was a decision that would save my life. Henry slowly approached my bed, stopping next to the oxygen equipment that kept me stable. For several seconds, he remained motionless, apparently verifying that I was completely unconscious. I could feel his nervous breathing, the imperceptible tremor in his hands, the tension emanating from his entire body. What happened next exceeded my worst nightmares. With deliberate and calculated movements, he began manipulating the oxygen tube connected to my nose. First, he slightly loosened the connection, as if testing the system's resistance. Then, with a determination that chilled my blood, he completely disconnected the oxygen supply. At that moment, leaning toward my ear, he whispered the words that would be etched into my memory forever. "This is the last breath you'll take, old man. It's time for you to rest forever, and let us live in peace." The initial shock almost made me react involuntarily, but I managed to maintain absolute self-control. My heart pounded furiously, but I continued to feign unconsciousness while listening to every word that came out of my own son's mouth. "Denise was right," he continued, speaking in a low voice, believing I couldn't hear him. "We've been waiting years for you to decide to retire and hand the company over, but your stubbornness is ruining us. The banks won't wait any longer. Dad, we've made commitments based on the inheritance, and now we need immediate cash." His words revealed a macabre plan that left me completely devastated. It wasn't a momentary impulse or a desperate decision. It was a plan carefully worked out between him and his wife to eliminate me and take possession of everything I had built over decades of honest work. Sterling Development Group is easily worth $2,500,000 in the current market, his sinister monologue continued. With that amount, we can pay off the debts on the coastal condo, the personal loans we took out last year, and still have enough money left over to live comfortably without working for several years. The magnitude of his betrayal hit me like a hammer. Not only was he trying to murder me, but he had also been using my company as collateral to acquire personal debts without my knowledge or authorization. The trust I had placed in him for years had been systematically betrayed. "Valerie will never find out anything," he continued, with a coldness that terrified me. "She lives too far away and has always been disconnected from the family business. By the time she gets here from Atlanta for the funeral, we'll have already legalized the transfer of properties. Denise already consulted with her cousin, the attorney, about the expedited probate process." Every word was a direct stab to my father's heart. The son I had raised, educated, and loved unconditionally for 4 decades was planning my death with the same casualness one plans a vacation. For approximately 10 minutes, I remained without supplemental oxygen, feeling my body begin to experience the first signs of deprivation. My mental training, developed over years of making business decisions under pressure, allowed me to maintain external calm while internally I fought against panic and the desperate need to take a deep breath. Henry continued talking, apparently satisfied with the progress of his devilish plan. Tomorrow morning, when the nurses discover the equipment was accidentally disconnected during the night, it will be too late. At your age, and with pneumonia, no one will suspect anything strange. It will be classified as a natural medical fatality. The precision of his planning showed me that this was not an improvised scheme. They had carefully studied my medical condition, the hospital's protocols, the nurses' routines, and calculated exactly how to execute the perfect crime without raising suspicion. In that critical moment, when I was starting to feel dizzy from the lack of oxygen, I heard footsteps approaching the hospital corridor. The steps quickly intensified. Henry panicked when he realized someone was heading directly toward my room at that hour of the morning. With clumsy, desperate movements, he tried to hastily reconnect the oxygen tube, but his nervousness betrayed him. The door swung completely open, and the hallway light illuminated the entire scene. It was Nurse Clara Johnson, the night shift supervisor, a woman of 45 with over 20 years of hospital experience. Her professional, trained gaze immediately caught that something was wrong. "What are you doing here at this hour, Mr. Sterling?" Clara asked in a firm but polite tone, addressing Henry while turning on the room lights. Her eyes immediately rested on the oxygen equipment, noting that the connections were not in their usual position. Henry stammered, visibly nervous, desperately searching for a convincing explanation. I came to check on Dad. I thought he was having trouble breathing, and noticed the oxygen tube was a little loose. I was just trying to secure it better." Clara professionally approached the medical equipment, meticulously inspecting each connection with the experience of someone who had seen similar situations before. "That's strange, Mr. Sterling. I checked this equipment myself less than 2 hours ago during my 1:30 a.m. rounds, and everything was perfectly connected and functioning normally." The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Henry tried to maintain his composure, but beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. Maybe it just came loose on its own. You know how these hospital machines are. Sometimes the connections shift. Meanwhile, I continued to pretend I was deeply sedated, but internally, my mind worked at lightning speed, processing all the information I had heard. Clara represented my immediate salvation, but I also understood that I needed to handle this situation with extreme caution to avoid prematurely alerting Henry that I knew his murderous intentions. Clara took her small flashlight and carefully examined my vital signs, checking my pulse, temperature, and oxygen saturation levels on the digital monitor. Mr. Sterling's parameters show a slight irregularity in the last few minutes. Saturation dropped temporarily, but is stabilizing again. "Is that normal?" Henry asked, trying to sound concerned, but unable to completely hide his nervousness. "With patients your father's age and medical condition, any interruption to the oxygen supply can be potentially dangerous," Clara explained, while meticulously noting the situation on her electronic tablet. "That's why we have strict protocols and perform constant checks every 2 hours." I discreetly watched Clara register every detail: the exact time, the state of the equipment, Henry's presence, the irregularities in my vital signs. Her professionalism and attention to detail partially reassured me, knowing there was a documented trail of what had happened. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate your concern for your father, but I must remind you that visits outside established hours require prior authorization from the medical staff," Clara continued with diplomatic firmness. "Furthermore, any manipulation of medical equipment must be carried out exclusively by trained personnel." Henry nodded submissively, but I could perceive the contained frustration and anger in his facial expression. His perfect plan had been interrupted at the most critical moment, and now he had to retreat without achieving his macabre goal. "Of course, nurse. I was just worried about Dad. Are you sure he's stable now?" he asked, making a final attempt to get information about my real condition. "Mr. Sterling is responding appropriately to treatment. His vital signs have completely normalized, and the oxygen supply is working correctly," Clara replied while performing a final check of the equipment. "I suggest you return during the established visiting hours, from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. After Henry left in a huff, Clara remained in the room for several more minutes, conducting a complete review of all monitoring systems. Her professional experience had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about the whole situation had not seemed completely normal to her. Once she confirmed we were alone, I slowly opened my eyes and whispered very softly, "Nurse Clara." She immediately approached, surprised that I was conscious. "Mr. Sterling, how do you feel? Were you asleep during your son's visit?" "I heard everything," I confessed, in a voice barely audible. "I need to make an urgent call, but no one can know. It's a matter of life or death." Clara looked at me with a serious expression, processing the implicit gravity of my words. Her experience in the hospital had taught her to recognize complicated family situations, and my tone of desperate urgency confirmed that something very serious was happening. "What do you need me to do, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, with professionalism and absolute discretion. "My cell phone is in the nightstand drawer. I need to call my attorney, Marcus Ellison. It is essential that I speak with him immediately before my son returns tomorrow." Clara discreetly retrieved my phone and helped me make the call. It was 4:20 in the morning, but Marcus was a trusted friend of over 20 years, and I knew he would respond to a genuine emergency regardless of the hour. "Vernon, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Marcus answered with a worried voice after the third ring. "Marcus, I need to see you urgently at the hospital. It's a legal and personal emergency that I cannot explain over the phone. Can you come right now?" "Of course, Vernon. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Do you need me to bring any specific documents?" "Bring everything related to my current will and the company's incorporation documents. We're going to make immediate and definitive changes." Marcus arrived at the hospital exactly at 5:10 a.m., dressed in a suit and carrying his black leather briefcase. Clara had discreetly coordinated his entry, introducing him to the security staff as a medical consultant, a specialist coming to evaluate my case at the urgent request of the family. The strategy worked perfectly. In hospitals like County General, medical consultations at any hour are completely normal, especially for older patients with respiratory complications. Marcus had even brought a white doctor's coat, which he used as a convincing disguise. "Vernon, explain exactly what happened," Marcus said once Clara left us alone, securing the door and maintaining discreet vigilance from outside. I recounted every detail of the traumatic experience. Henry's stealthy entry, the deliberate disconnection of the oxygen, his confessions about pre-established plans with Denise, the debts incurred, the unauthorized use of my company as collateral, and his calculating coldness in planning my murder as a financial solution. Marcus listened with an increasingly grave expression, taking detailed notes in his legal pad. His experience as an attorney specializing in family and probate law allowed him to immediately grasp the legal and personal implications of the entire situation. "Vernon, this constitutes premeditated attempted murder," he explained with absolute seriousness. "But before taking any legal action, we must protect your assets immediately. If Henry has incurred debts using the company as collateral, they could seize assets at any moment. That's exactly why I called you, Marcus. I need to completely change my will this very morning. Henry must be totally excluded from any inheritance, and Valerie must receive all my assets and the company. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out several legal documents along with his laptop. I have your current will here, dated September 2021, where you established an equal distribution between Henry and Valerie. Are you completely sure you want to exclude him entirely? This decision will be irreversible. Absolutely sure, I replied without any hesitation. A son who tries to murder his own father for money doesn't deserve a single dollar of what I've built in my lifetime. Valerie has always shown integrity, independence, and solid values. She will be the sole heir. For the next hour, Marcus meticulously drafted the new will with precise legal specifications. The documents established that Valerie Sterling would receive 100% of Sterling Development Group, all real estate properties, bank accounts, investments, and any valuable assets belonging to my personal estate. Simultaneously, we included specific clauses that invalidated any debt or financial commitment incurred by Henry, using my name, my company, or my properties as collateral. These legal protections were essential to prevent his creditors from claiming any part of my estate. We also need to contact Carol immediately to initiate a complete financial investigation, Marcus suggested. We must identify exactly what commitments Henry has acquired and with which banks or lenders. Carol has access to all the house files and knows the location of important documents. She can review the bank correspondence, contracts, and any paper Henry may have signed behind my back, I confirmed. We called Carol from my phone. Although it was 6:30 in the morning, she answered immediately. Her concern for my health was evident. "Vernon, how are you feeling, my love? Did something get worse during the night?" she asked with genuine tenderness that dramatically contrasted with our son's murderous intentions. "Carol, I need you to do something very important for me. Go to the Home Office immediately and review all bank documents from the last 2 years. Look for any paper with Henry's signature, especially loan agreements, guarantees, or collateral involving our properties." "Something serious has happened, Vernon. Your voice sounds very tense," my wife intuitively perceived. "I'll explain the details when you come to the hospital, but it's crucial that you bring all the documentation you find. Marcus is here with me, and we are handling an urgent legal matter related to the company." Carol, always efficient and committed, confirmed that she would be at the hospital before 9 a.m. with all the requested documents. Her unconditional loyalty throughout 4 decades of marriage was a heartbreaking contrast to our son's betrayal. While we waited, Marcus and I strategically planned the next steps. It was crucial to maintain absolute discretion about our legal moves until all asset modifications were complete, and we had full documentary evidence of Henry's fraudulent activities. "Vernon, once we sign this new will, it will be automatically registered with the State Registry of Wills," Marcus explained. "However, I also recommend that we prepare a sworn statement detailing the events of this morning, in case we need to file criminal charges later." "Do you think we should involve the police immediately?" I asked, still feeling the pain of a father despite everything that had happened. "First, let's secure your estate and gather complete evidence of his fraudulent activities. Then we can decide whether to file charges for attempted murder. Nurse Clara will be a crucial witness since she witnessed the scene and documented the irregularities with your medical equipment." At 7:45 a.m., I solemnly signed the new will with Marcus as the legal witness. The document was officially recorded, establishing Valerie as the sole universal heir and completely excluding Henry from any inheritance. Clara discreetly returned to inform us that the day shift would begin in 15 minutes, meaning we had to conclude our secret meeting before the new medical staff arrived. "Marcus, this document must remain absolutely secret until we decide the right time to reveal it," I instructed him, while placing a copy in my nightstand drawer, hidden among my personal belongings. "Completely understood, Vernon. I will maintain total confidentiality until I receive specific instructions from you. Do you want me to contact Valerie directly to inform her about the situation? Not yet. I prefer to handle that conversation personally when she comes to visit. Valerie deserves to hear the truth directly from me, not through third parties. Marcus left the hospital, maintaining his disguise as a medical consultant, taking all the original legal documentation for safekeeping at his professional office. I remained in bed, pretending to be asleep, but internally experiencing a complex mix of relief, deep sorrow, and iron determination. I had made the most difficult decision of my life, but also the most necessary to protect my dignity and the fruits of decades of honest work. At 8:50 a.m., Carol arrived at the hospital carrying a bulky folder full of documents. Her face reflected worry and confusion, clearly intrigued by my urgent request to review financial papers at such an early hour. Vernon, I found some very strange things in the office, she said as she sat by my bed and opened the folder with a serious expression. There are documents I've never seen before, and some are very recent. Clara, who had become our discreet ally, ensured we had complete privacy, closing the door and posting a medical consultation in progress sign outside. Carol began systematically showing me every suspicious document she had located during her morning search. The first paper she showed me caused an immediate shock. It was a personal loan contract for $85,000, dated January 2024. It was signed by Henry Sterling, using the future inheritance of the family business as collateral. Did you authorize this, Vernon? Carol asked with obvious disbelief in her voice. I've never seen this document in my life, I replied, feeling indignation rise in my chest. Henry used my company as collateral without my knowledge or consent. This constitutes serious financial fraud. The second document was even more alarming. A mortgage application for $15,000 on our coastal condo, submitted by Henry and Denise last February, listing Vernon Sterling as a solid co-signer. My signature had been crudely forged. Carol, compare this signature with my authentic one on any official document, I requested, pointing out the clear forgery. The differences are clear to any handwriting expert. We continued reviewing the rest of the documentation. There were receipts for payments to private lenders, invoices for luxury items purchased on credit, and even a preliminary contract for the sale of the coastal condo for $380,000, stipulating that the transaction would be completed once the probate process was formalized. Vernon, according to these papers, Henry and Denise have incurred total debts of over $100,000 in the last 6 months, Carol calculated, mentally summing all the figures. And everything is backed by properties that technically still belong to us. The magnitude of the financial betrayal left me temporarily speechless. Not only had they planned my murder, but they had also been meticulously preparing the looting of my estate for months, forging my signature and compromising family properties without legal authorization. In that critical moment, Dr. Charles Owens walked in to perform his morning medical rounds. His expression immediately changed when he saw the folder of documents scattered over my bed and the evident tension in the air. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. How are you feeling this morning? I see you have an early visitor," he commented while checking my medical history on his tablet. "Dr. Owens, I need to consult with you about something very important," I said, adopting a serious tone that immediately captured his professional attention. Nurse Clara from the night shift witnessed a very irregular situation in my room during the early morning. Could you speak with her to get the details? The doctor nodded and used the internal intercom to call Clara, who appeared a few minutes later with her nocturnal incident report. "Doctor, I registered a significant anomaly at approximately 3:30 a.m., Clara explained with absolute professionalism. The patient's son was found manipulating the oxygen equipment without authorization. When I arrived, The tube was disconnected, and Mr. Sterling's saturation levels had dropped considerably. Dr. Owens frowned as he carefully read the written report Clara handed him. "This is very serious, Mr. Sterling. Any unauthorized interruption of the oxygen supply can have fatal consequences for a patient in your medical condition. Doctor, based on this situation and for reasons of personal safety, I request that a visual monitoring system be installed in my room," I asked him directly. "I fear similar incidents might be repeated." The doctor briefly reflected on my request. "That's a very unusual request, Mr. Sterling, but considering the circumstances documented by Nurse Clara, I can justify the installation of security cameras as a medical precaution. I would be enormously grateful, Doctor. My peace of mind is fundamental to my recovery, and these incidents are causing me a lot of stress," I insisted with a convincing tone. "Perfect. I will immediately contact the hospital's security department to install a discreet video surveillance system before noon. The cameras will record any activity in your room 24 hours a day." Once Dr. Owens left to coordinate the installation of the security equipment, Carol and I continued analyzing the fraudulent documentation. Every paper represented a new layer of betrayal and manipulation they had been executing behind my back for months. "Vernon, is there anything else I need to show you?" Carol asked, with a particularly grave expression, as she pulled a sealed envelope from the bottom of the folder. I found this hidden behind other documents in the bottom drawer of the desk. I opened the envelope and found a series of photographs of our most valuable properties: the main house in Dallas, the coastal condo, the central office of Sterling Development Group, and several investment plots. Each photograph had handwritten notes with market value estimates and projected sale dates. "Carol, this proves they've been systematically cataloging all our assets for later liquidation," I analyzed while examining each image. "This was not an improvised plan. They have been preparing this looting for a long time." The accumulated evidence painted a devastating picture of premeditation, fraud, and family betrayal that exceeded my worst expectations. Henry and Denise had not only planned my death, but they had also been meticulously preparing the appropriation of my entire estate. "What do we do now, Vernon?" Carol asked with tears in her eyes, clearly overwhelmed by the scale of our son's betrayal. "Now we wait," I replied with cold determination. "The cameras will be installed before noon, and I am sure Henry will return to try and finish what he started last night. This time, we will have irrefutable visual evidence of his murderous intentions." At 11:45 a.m., specialized technicians from the hospital's security department discreetly finished installing 2 high-definition cameras in my room. One was strategically positioned to capture the entire area around the medical equipment, while the second offered a complete panoramic view of the room. The security chief, an experienced man named Rick Mason, personally explained the system's operation to me. "Mr. Sterling, the cameras will record continuously in high resolution with ambient audio. Everything is automatically stored on our central servers. And you can also access the images in real time from this discrete monitor." He showed me a small touchscreen installed next to my bed, camouflaged among the usual medical equipment. "If you observe any suspicious situation, you can press this silent alert button, and the security staff will come immediately without making a sound." Carol remained by my side all morning, meticulously organizing all the documentary evidence we had collected. We created a complete chronological file of every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature, and every financial and legal commitment Henry had made using my estate. "Vernon, Valerie called half an hour ago asking about your status," Carol informed me. "I told her you were stable, but preferred to rest today. When do you plan to tell her about this whole situation? After we get the definitive visual evidence of Henry's intentions, I replied, with determination. Valerie deserves to know the whole truth, but I want to have irrefutable proof before shattering the image she has of her brother. During the afternoon, several members of the medical staff made their usual rounds, all commenting positively on my progressive improvement. Ironically, while my physical health was recovering, my emotional world was collapsing due to the family betrayal. At 2:30 p.m., Dr. Owens arrived with encouraging medical news. Mr. Sterling, your oxygen levels have fully stabilized, and the lung infection is responding excellently to antibiotics. If we continue with this positive evolution, I could consider discharging you within a week. Doctor, would it be possible to maintain my appearance of frailty for a few more days? I asked with a request that clearly surprised him. For personal reasons that I prefer not to detail, I need any visitor to perceive me as weak and vulnerable. The doctor observed me with professional curiosity, but respected my privacy. I can adjust the medication to maintain a certain apparent drowsiness, and we can continue the supplemental oxygen, even if it's no longer strictly necessary. Is this related to the security system we installed? Exactly, Doctor. I appreciate your understanding and absolute discretion, I confirmed, feeling relieved to have a medical ally who understood the seriousness of my situation without asking unnecessary questions. Carol temporarily went home to prepare food and bring clean clothes, but before she left, we agreed on discreet signals to communicate during critical moments. If something serious happened, she would return immediately. March 16th dawned with a palpable tension in the air. I had slept restlessly, mentally anticipating the possible scenarios that would unfold during the day. The cameras had recorded a quiet night, but my instinct told me that Henry would return soon to complete his macabre plan. At 10:15 a.m., exactly as he had anticipated, Henry appeared at my door. He carried fresh flowers and an expression of feigned concern that I could now clearly identify as a calculated performance. "Good morning, Dad. How are you feeling today?" he asked, while placing the flowers in a vase by the window. His behavior seemed completely normal to any external observer. I kept my eyes closed and breathed with apparent difficulty, pretending to be weaker than I really was. "Henry, I feel very tired today," I murmured in a voice barely audible. "Don't worry, Dad. The doctors say your recovery is going very well. You just need to rest, and you'll be home with us soon," he replied, sitting by my bed with false tenderness. For the next 20 minutes, we maintained a superficial conversation about everyday matters. Henry asked about my appetite, my pain levels, and my recovery expectations. Everything sounded perfectly normal, like any conversation between a father and son during a hospitalization. However, I was discreetly observing his every movement, waiting for the moment when he would reveal his true intentions. The cameras were silently recording every word, every gesture, every facial expression that would later serve as irrefutable legal evidence. At 11:30 a.m., Henry got up and walked toward the window, seeming to admire the view from the hospital. "Dad, there's something I need to discuss with you when you feel more energetic," he said without turning toward me. "What do you need, son?" I asked, maintaining my act of extreme weakness. "It's about the company, Dad. Denise and I have been thinking that maybe you should consider gradually transferring the administration to the next generation. You're 68, and this health scare has made us reflect on the future." His words confirmed exactly what I had heard during his nocturnal confession 2 days earlier. He was initiating the conversation that would eventually lead him to reveal his criminal plans to the cameras. "Henry, I don't feel ready for those important decisions yet," I replied weakly. giving him enough rope to continue developing his strategy. I understand perfectly, Dad, but think about it. Sterling Development Group could be worth over $2 million if we decide to sell it at the right time. With that amount, Mom and you could live comfortably without financial worries for the rest of your lives. The greed in his voice became increasingly evident. As he described his plans to liquidate my estate, I continued to pretend to be too weak to fully process his suggestions, which encouraged him to be more specific and direct in his proposals. Besides, Dad, Valerie lives in Atlanta and clearly has no interest in the family business. It would be more practical for Denise and me to take care of all the administrative and legal aspects, he added as he sat back down by my bed. It was exactly the opening I had been waiting for. Henry, I think I need to rest a little more, I murmured, closing my eyes completely and relaxing my entire body to simulate that I had fallen into a deep sleep due to exhaustion. My acting worked perfectly. Henry remained silent for several minutes, watching me, apparently verifying that I was completely unconscious. I could feel his breath approaching my face, probably checking the depth of my supposed unconsciousness. Once convinced that I was totally vulnerable, his behavior changed drastically. His voice adopted the same cold, calculating tone I had heard in the early morning of March 14th. "Perfect, you stubborn old man," he muttered to himself, as he walked back toward the oxygen equipment. "This time, there will be no untimely interruptions from meddling nurses." The security cameras meticulously captured his every movement as he carefully inspected the oxygen tube. This time, however, his approach was much more cautious and systematic than on his first attempt. 2 days wasted thanks to that nurse," he continued, speaking in a low voice, clearly believing I couldn't hear him. "But now I have enough time to do this correctly, and without leaving any suspicious evidence." He began slowly disconnecting the main tube from the oxygen supply, but this time he also manipulated the monitor controls so that the alarms wouldn't activate immediately. His technical knowledge surprised me and made me realize that he had carefully studied the medical equipment's operation. Denise was right when she said we needed a more sophisticated plan, he confessed while continuing to manipulate the monitoring systems. "The $100,000 we owe can't wait any longer. The private lenders will start seizing property next week if we don't make the full payment." His words confirmed the exact figures that Carol and I had calculated based on the fraudulent documentation found at home. But now I was hearing directly from his mouth the confirmation that they had used illegal lenders, which further complicated the financial situation. Sterling Development Group can easily sell for $2,300,000, according to the appraisals we did last month, his confession continued, as he verified that the oxygen had completely stopped flowing. "With that amount, we pay off all the debts, buy the coastal condo we've been looking at, and still have over $400,000 left for personal investments." The precision of his financial calculations showed me that this was not an improvised plan born of desperation, but a meticulously planned strategy over months. They had professionally appraised my company, identified potential buyers, and calculated exactly how much money they would gain from my death. "Valerie will never suspect anything strange," he continued, making sure there was no physical evidence of manipulation on the equipment. "She lives too far away and barely visits the city twice a year. By the time she comes for the funeral, we'll have completed all the legal transactions." At that moment, my indignation reached levels I had never experienced in 68 years of life. Not only was I hearing the details of my own murder, but I also knew their plans to deceive Valerie and steal her rightful inheritance. "Denise's cousin, the lawyer, has already prepared all the expedited probate documents," he added with evident satisfaction in his voice. "In this state, when there's no recent specific will, the children automatically inherit in equal shares. Valerie will get her part, sure, but will control the sale and administration of all the assets. His ignorance about my new will gave me an additional strategic advantage. Henry and Denise had based their entire plan on the assumption that my 2021 will was still valid. They never imagined that I had completely modified my testamentary dispositions just 2 days ago. For approximately 12 minutes, I remained without supplemental oxygen while Henry meticulously arranged the scene to look like a natural technical failure of the medical equipment. His previous experience on March 14th had taught him exactly what adjustments to make to avoid immediate alarms. This time, when the nurses discover the equipment failure, it will be too late to revive you, he murmured with sinister satisfaction. At your age, and with pneumonia, oxygen deprivation for 15 minutes will definitely be fatal. In that critical moment, when I began to feel the first real symptoms of oxygen starvation, I decided I had obtained enough incriminating evidence. It was time to execute the final phase of my strategy. I discreetly pressed the silent alert button that Rick Mason had installed next to my bed. The system would immediately send a signal to the security control center, and specialized personnel would head to my room in less than 2 minutes. Simultaneously, I slowly opened my eyes and partially sat up in bed, pretending to gradually wake up from my deep sleep. My acting had to be perfectly convincing to capture his reaction of complete surprise. "Henry, what are you doing with my oxygen?" I asked in a weak but clearly audible voice, simulating confusion and disorientation from having awakened unexpectedly. His face instantly transformed into a mask of absolute terror. His eyes bulged, his skin turned dramatically pale, and his hands began to tremble uncontrollably. I had never seen a human being experience such a level of shock and panic. "Dad, I was just... the tube seemed disconnected," he stammered desperately, as he tried to quickly reconnect the oxygen supply with clumsy, nervous movements. "Henry, I heard everything you said," I declared, my voice gradually regaining its natural strength and authority. "Every word about the $100,000 in debt, the plans to sell my company for $2 million, $300,000, and your intentions to murder me to collect the inheritance." His legs began to give out, and he had to lean against the wall to avoid falling. His mouth opened and closed without emitting a sound, like a fish out of water gasping for air. At that exact moment, the door opened, and 3 security guards discreetly entered the room, followed by Clara and Dr. Owens, who had been automatically alerted by the emergency system. "Gentlemen, everything that just happened has been recorded by our security cameras," Rick Mason announced, while displaying his tablet with the real-time images. "We have complete visual evidence of unauthorized manipulation of medical equipment and explicit confessions of criminal intent." Henry completely collapsed into a chair, covering his face with his hands while sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, don't call the police yet," Henry sobbed through desperate tears. "Dad, I can explain everything. Things got very complicated, and we didn't know what to do. I never really meant to hurt you." His pathetic display evoked a mixture of contempt and pity that I never thought I would experience toward my own son. After hearing his detailed confessions about murder plans, he was now trying to minimize the seriousness of his criminal acts. "Rick, please play the full recording so everyone present can hear exactly what my son confessed while he thought I was unconscious," I requested, maintaining a firm, controlled tone. Rick Mason connected his tablet to the large monitor in the room and played the entire recorded sequence from the moment Henry had begun manipulating the oxygen equipment. The images were crystal clear, and the audio perfectly captured every word of his confession. Dr. Owens listened with an increasingly grave expression, while Clara took additional notes for the official medical report. The security guards remained in strategic positions, ready to act if the situation became more tense. Mr. Sterling, according to these recordings, your son not only deliberately attempted to interrupt your oxygen supply, but he also explicitly confessed intentions to cause your death for financial gain, Rick declared with absolute professionalism. Dad, please forgive me, Henry implored, kneeling by my bed. We're desperate because of the debts. The lenders threatened to physically harm us if we didn't pay this week. We couldn't find any other solution. Henry, incurring $100,000 in debt, using my company and my properties as collateral, without my authorization, already constitutes serious financial fraud, I replied, with absolute coldness. But planning my murder as a solution to your financial problems crosses every imaginable line. At that moment, Marcus Ellison appeared in the doorway. I had discreetly called him the night before, and we had agreed that he would arrive at exactly this time with all the necessary legal documents for the final confrontation. Good morning, Vernon. I see the situation has unfolded as we anticipated, Marcus said as he entered, carrying his leather briefcase and observing the scene with a serious but controlled expression. Henry immediately recognized our family lawyer, and his face turned even paler, intuitively understanding that Marcus's presence meant additional legal complications for him. Marcus, please show Henry the document we officially registered on March 15th, 2024, I requested directly, without preamble or unnecessary explanations. Marcus took a folder from his briefcase and handed a certified copy of the new will to Henry, who received it with trembling hands. His eyes quickly scanned the document, his expression changing from initial shock to absolute horror. This can't be real, he murmured, reading the clauses that completely excluded him from any inheritance. Dad, you can't do this. I'm your son. You were my son, until the moment you decided to become my potential murderer, I countered, with a firmness that surprised even those who knew me well. This will establishes that Valerie Sterling will receive the entirety of Sterling Development Group, all real estate properties, bank accounts, and any valuable assets belonging to my estate. Henry began to hyperventilate as he assimilated the full implications of his new reality. He had not only lost all hope of inheritance, but he also faced criminal charges for attempted murder and financial fraud. Furthermore, Henry, this will include specific clauses that invalidate any debt incurred using my name, my company, or my properties as collateral without explicit written authorization, Marcus added with an implacable professional tone. That means the $100,000 you owe to private lenders is entirely your personal responsibility. My estate is completely protected from any claim by your creditors. I continued to explain the legal consequences of his fraudulent actions. Denise chose that exact moment to make her dramatic entrance into the room, apparently alerted by someone about the critical situation unfolding. Her face reflected a mixture of fury and despair that made her look completely distraught. "What is going on here?" she shouted, aggressively addressing me. "Why are there security guards? And why is Henry crying?" "Denise, your husband has just been caught trying to murder me for the second time to collect an inheritance that no longer exists," I explained, with absolute calm, secretly enjoying her reaction of total disbelief. Rick played the recordings again for Denise's benefit, who listened with growing horror to Henry's detailed confessions about their criminal plans and fraudulent debts. "This is a setup," Denise shrieked when the evidence finished playing. "They've manipulated these recordings to incriminate Henry. My father-in-law has always been manipulative and controlling." Denise turned to Henry, desperately searching for some explanation that could minimize the seriousness of the situation. but he remained paralyzed by the shock and the understanding that his life had irreversibly changed. "Henry, say something. Explain to them that this is a misunderstanding," she pleaded, shaking him by the shoulders. "There's nothing to explain, Denise," Henry replied in a broken voice. "We planned it together. We needed the money, and we thought no one would ever find out." His final confession eliminated any possibility of denial or subsequent manipulation. Both had been completely exposed with irrefutable evidence of their criminal intentions and fraudulent activities. "Marcus, proceed with the necessary legal steps to fully protect my assets," I instructed while watching the couple I had considered family crumble before my eyes. "I've already prepared the complaints for attempted murder, document fraud, and use of false documents," Marcus confirmed. "I've also contacted an economic crimes specialist to recover any assets they may have illegally transferred." Justice was finally beginning to manifest. Denise's reaction was explosive and completely predictable. She lunged toward my bed, shouting incoherent accusations, while the security guards professionally intercepted her before she could physically reach me. "You're a monster," she roared with uncontrolled fury. "Henry is your son. How can you destroy your own family for money? Everything we've done has been out of desperation, not malice." Her hypocrisy was nauseating. After meticulously planning my murder and committing fraud 4 months, she was now trying to present herself as a victim of desperate circumstances. "Denise, the $100,000 you owe didn't magically appear overnight," I responded, maintaining a calm tone that dramatically contrasted with her hysteria. "You consciously took out loans, forged my signature, and used my properties as collateral without authorization. That requires deliberate planning, not impulsive desperation." Marcus intervened, showing the complete folder of fraudulent documentation that Carol had compiled. "Mrs. Sterling, we have evidence of at least 15 separate financial transactions carried out over the last 8 months, using Mr. Sterling's estate as unauthorized backing." Denise's eyes darted to the documents with an expression of growing desperation. She knew perfectly well that every paper represented additional incriminating evidence that would further complicate her legal situation. Furthermore, Marcus continued relentlessly, "We have located photographs of family properties with handwritten annotations of market valuations and projected sale dates, all in your husband's own handwriting." Henry finally lifted his head, his eyes red from crying, and looked directly at Denise. "We can't deny anything anymore, Denise. Everything is documented and recorded. We've completely lost." "Shut up, Henry," his wife screamed at him. "Don't say anything else. Without an attorney present." It was too late for legal defense strategies. The evidence was overwhelmingly clear, and the recorded confessions eliminated any possibility of arguing innocence or mitigating circumstances. In that moment of maximum tension, Valerie suddenly appeared in the doorway. She had caught the first flight from Atlanta after Carol called her that morning, partially explaining the gravity of the family situation. "Dad, what is going on here?" Valerie asked with a confused expression, observing the scene. Security guards, lawyers, recording equipment, and her family members in a state of total emotional collapse. "Valerie, sit down, please. You need to hear something that will forever change your perspective on your brother," I said, indicating a chair away from the chaos surrounding Henry and Denise. Rick played the complete recordings again for Valerie's benefit, who listened in absolute silence to Henry's detailed confessions about his plans for murder and asset appropriation. Her face gradually transitioned from initial shock to horror, then to disbelief, and finally to a profound sadness that broke my heart. "Henry, did you really plan to kill Dad for money?" she asked him directly, her voice cracking with emotion. Her brother couldn't meet her gaze and lowered his head in shame. "Valerie, things got really complicated. We owed money to dangerous people. We didn't see any other way. And where did I fit into your plans?" Valerie continued with a firmness that made me deeply proud. According to what I heard in those recordings, you planned to deceive me about the circumstances of Dad's death and manipulate the inheritance. Denise tried to interrupt with more desperate justifications, but Valerie silenced her with an authoritative gesture that demonstrated the strong character I had always admired in her. I don't want to hear explanations from you, Denise. You were involved in a plan to murder my father. There is no possible justification for that, Valerie declared with an emotional maturity that far surpassed that of people much older. Valerie, your father changed his will to completely exclude Henry and leave you as the sole universal heir, Marcus informed her, handing her a copy of the legal document. Valerie carefully read the will with a serious expression, mentally processing the implications of the decisions I had made during the last few days. Dad, I perfectly understand why you made this decision, she finally said, as she approached my bed and gently took my hand. No one should have to face a betrayal of this magnitude from their own family. Her unconditional support gave me a sense of emotional relief that I had been desperately needing since this whole nightmare began. Henry, Denise, I want you to leave this hospital immediately and never approach Dad again, Valerie ordered with a natural authority that commanded instant respect. You have caused enough harm and pain. Valerie, please, we're family, Denise pleaded, making one last desperate attempt at emotional manipulation. Family doesn't plan murders for money, Valerie replied, with absolute coldness. You chose to become criminals. Now you must face the consequences of your decisions. The security guards, following Rick's instructions, formally escorted Henry and Denise out of the room and the hospital, with specific orders not to allow their return without explicit legal authorization. Dr. Owens, I want it noted in the official medical record that Henry Sterling and Denise Sterling are prohibited from accessing this room and any information about my health status, I formally requested. Completely understood, Mr. Sterling. I will immediately update your clinical history with these access restrictions, the doctor confirmed, taking notes on his tablet. Once the room fell silent and we were alone, Valerie, Marcus, Carola, and I could finally take a deep breath and feel that I had regained total control of my life and my estate. Dad, I'm so sorry you had to go through this traumatic experience, Valerie told me with tears in her eyes. I never suspected Henry was capable of something like this. Valerie, neither you nor anyone else could have anticipated this betrayal. Henry and Denise made conscious decisions that led them down a criminal path. You bear no responsibility for their actions. What will happen to them now? She asked, with natural curiosity, about the legal consequences her former family members would face. Marcus will file criminal charges for attempted murder and document fraud, I explained. Additionally, their private creditors will begin seizure processes when they discover they won't have access to my estate to settle their debts. Justice would finally take its natural course. 3 weeks later, on April 8th, I was discharged from the hospital, fully recovered. The pneumonia had been successfully overcome, and ironically, all the emotional stress of the family betrayal had not negatively affected my physical recovery. Valerie had remained in Dallas throughout that period, working remotely and coordinating with Marcus on all legal aspects related to the asset transfer and the judicial processes against Henry and Denise. Dad, I've been reviewing the Sterling Development Group accounting books in detail, Valerie informed me while organizing documents at the dining room table of our family home. The company is in excellent financial health, but I think we should consider diversifying the investments to better protect the estate. Her professional capacity and strategic vision impressed me deeply. For years, I had underestimated her interest and competence in the family business, mistakenly assuming that her independent career in Atlanta meant a total disconnection from our commercial affairs. Valerie, would you be interested in gradually taking on the direct administration of the company? I asked her directly, feeling genuine curiosity about her future professional aspirations. Honestly, Dad, I think it would be more beneficial to sell Sterling Development Group to serious buyers and reinvest the capital in more modern and diversified sectors. She replied, with a business perspective that surprised me with its maturity and foresight. Her suggestion made solid economic sense. At 68, I no longer had the energy or motivation to continue actively managing a construction company, especially after discovering that my planned heir had been illegally using the company to secure fraudulent loans. Have you identified potential buyers? I asked, interested in exploring that possibility. Marcus connected me with 3 investment groups specializing in acquisitions of established construction companies. According to preliminary valuations, Sterling Development Group could sell for approximately $2,350,000, considering our project history, stable clients, and real estate assets. The figure almost exactly matched the estimates Henry had mentioned during his recorded confessions, which added a bitter irony to the whole situation. He had correctly calculated the market value of the company, but would never receive a single dollar from that transaction. During those weeks of recovery, Marcus kept us informed about the progress of the legal processes against Henry and Denise. The charges for attempted murder had been formally presented to the district attorney's office, backed by irrefutable video evidence and the professional testimonies of the hospital staff. Vernon, in addition to the criminal charges, we've initiated civil actions to recover any assets they may have transferred using false documents, Marcus explained during one of his weekly visits. Although we probably won't recover much money, it's important to set legal precedents that protect your estate. Have they tried to contact you directly or through intermediaries? I asked, morbidly curious about their reactions when facing the real consequences of their criminal actions. Denise called my office several times trying to negotiate some kind of out-of-court settlement, but I clearly explained that there is no possibility of negotiation. The criminal charges will take their normal legal course, he replied, with absolute professional firmness. Carol, who had remained surprisingly strong throughout the family crisis, began to show signs of relief and personal renewal. The confirmation that Valerie was completely trustworthy and loyal had eased her worries about the future of our family estate. Vernon, I think we should take advantage of this new stage in our lives to do things we had always postponed, she suggested one afternoon, while preparing tea in the kitchen. We have our health, we have financial resources, and now we have the peace of mind of knowing that Valerie will responsibly take care of everything. Her suggestion made me reflect on opportunities I had been ignoring for years, due to business obligations and family responsibilities that I now understood had been misplaced. What do you have in mind, Carol? I asked, feeling genuine curiosity about her personal aspirations. We always talked about traveling extensively through Europe, visiting museums, experiencing different cultures, but we never found the right time. Now, we could plan long trips without financial worries or urgent work commitments. The idea was enormously appealing. For decades, I had postponed personal experiences in favor of professional and family obligations, many of which I now understood had been misguided emotional investments. Valerie enthusiastically supported the suggestion of their travels. Dad, Mom, you should definitely seize this opportunity. I can coordinate the sale of the company and handle all the legal aspects with Marcus. You deserve to enjoy this new phase without administrative worries. Over the following weeks, we began seriously planning a series of extensive trips that would allow us to explore destinations we had always wanted to see. Valerie coordinated with travel agencies specializing in senior tourism, ensuring we had comfortable but exciting itineraries. On May 15th, Valerie presented me with a formal purchase offer for Sterling Development Group for $2,350,000, submitted by a European investment group with an excellent reputation and solid commercial references. Dad, I have thoroughly reviewed their financial background and commercial references. They are completely trustworthy and offer very favorable payment terms, 40% at the time of signing the contract, and the remaining balance in 6 monthly installments with minimum interest. Valerie, proceed with the sale. I trust your professional judgment and your ability to handle this transaction completely, I confirmed, feeling total peace of mind in delegating this responsibility into competent and loyal hands. Meanwhile, news about Henry and Denise reached us sporadically through mutual acquaintances. Their financial situation had deteriorated dramatically after the private lenders discovered they would not have access to my estate to recover their loans. Vernon, according to reports I received from contacts in the financial sector, they have lost their apartment to foreclosure and are currently living in a rented room on the outskirts of the city, Marcus informed me during one of our legal follow-up meetings. Has Henry found stable work? I asked, feeling a morbid curiosity about how he was facing the real consequences of his criminal decisions. He apparently works as a food delivery driver for one of those mobile apps. His pending criminal record has significantly complicated his traditional employment options. The poetic justice of his situation did not give me personal satisfaction, but it did confirm that decisions have real and proportional consequences. Henry had consciously chosen the path of betrayal and crime, and now he was directly experiencing the results of those choices. On June 1st, we officially signed the sale of Sterling Development Group, thus completing my definitive transition to total retirement and freeing me from any commercial responsibility that tied me to Dallas. On December 3rd, 2024, as the plane took off from the airport bound for Rome, I felt an emotional liberation I hadn't experienced in decades. Carol was sitting by the window reviewing our 2-year travel itinerary that included 15 different countries across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Dad, our first stop will be Rome for 2 weeks, then Florence, then Paris, and in January, we'll be in Switzerland to ski, she explained, with genuine enthusiasm, showing the hotel reservations on her tablet. During the 8 months since leaving the hospital, my life had undergone a complete transformation that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. The sale of Sterling Development Group for $2,350,000 had provided absolute financial security for the rest of our lives. And more importantly, it had eliminated any material connection to the betrayals of the past. Valerie had proven to be an exceptional administrator of our resources, intelligently diversifying the investments and establishing reserve funds that guaranteed stable passive income for decades. Her professional competence had far exceeded my initial expectations. Valerie, I want to thank you for handling the entire legal commercial transition with such professionalism, I told her sincerely, as the plane reached cruising altitude. Without your support and competence, I never would have managed to resolve this family crisis so successfully. Dad, I always knew that someday we would have to face difficult situations as a family, but I never imagined they would be so extreme, she replied with mature reflection. The important thing is that you discovered the truth before it was too late to protect yourself. During the first months after the hospital, Valerie and I had developed a much deeper and more authentic father-daughter relationship than we had maintained for years. Her unconditional support during the crisis had revealed personal qualities that I had underestimated due to geographical distance and our sporadic interactions. The legal processes against Henry and Denise had followed their natural legal course. In October, both had been convicted of document fraud and attempted murder. Henry received a sentence of 4 years in prison, while Denise was sentenced to 3 years for criminal complicity. Marcus informed me last week that judicial seizures recovered approximately $35,000 in assets they had acquired with fraudulent loans, Valerie had commented during our travel preparations. It's not a significant amount, but it sets important legal precedents. Justice had completely prevailed, although the emotional consequences of the entire experience would remain with me permanently. I had lost a son, but had gained a profound understanding of authentic loyalty and the true value of honest family relationships. During our flight to Rome, I reflected on the fundamental changes in my perspective on family, money, and the purpose of life. Henry's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a catalyst for discovering personal strengths I didn't know I had, and for genuinely valuing the people who deserved my trust and affection. Dad, do you ever regret the decisions you made regarding Henry? Valerie asked me with genuine curiosity about my internal emotional processes. Valerie, the decisions I made were the only ones possible to protect my dignity and my literal survival. I replied with absolute conviction. Henry consciously chose to become my enemy when he planned my murder. I simply responded appropriately to that threat. Do you think he will try to attack you again sometime? She continued asking. From prison, he has sent several letters through intermediaries, but they have all been intercepted by Marcus, following my specific instructions, I explained. I have no interest in reading apologies or justifications from someone who tried to murder me for money. But Valerie nodded understandingly. Her emotional maturity in processing complex family situations continued to impress me and reaffirmed my confidence in having chosen her as my sole heir. During our first days in Rome, we experienced a sense of freedom and renewal that had been absent from our lives for years. We visited the Colosseum, the Vatican museums, the Trevi Fountain, and enjoyed long meals at traditional restaurants without any time pressure or financial worries. Vernon, I don't remember the last time I felt so relaxed and optimistic about the future. Carol confessed to me one afternoon while walking through the cobblestone streets of Trastevere. It's as if we've recovered a youth we thought was lost. Her observation perfectly captured my own feelings. At 69, I felt more energetic and hopeful than I had during the previous decade, when I had been unconsciously carrying the weight of toxic family relationships and misguided expectations. Valerie had coordinated our itinerary to include enriching cultural experiences, gastronomic adventures, and enough free time for rest and personal reflection. Her meticulous planning allowed us to enjoy each destination without logistical stress or administrative worries. During the nights in luxury hotels, I frequently reflected on the dramatic contrast between my current situation and what my fate would have been if Henry had successfully executed his murderous plan. Instead of enjoying trips around the world with people who genuinely loved me, I would have been dead, and my estate would have been looted by criminals who feigned my paternal trust. Dad, I think this traumatic experience, though painful, ultimately freed you from family obligations that had been limiting you for years, Valerie observed during a dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Pantheon in Rome. Her perspective was profoundly accurate. For decades, I had been investing emotional energy and financial resources in relationships that turned out to be fundamentally false, while underestimating authentic connections that deserved greater attention and cultivation. Valerie, my only regret is not having recognized your genuine loyalty sooner, and having allowed Henry to monopolize so much of my attention for years, I confessed honestly. The important thing is that now we have unlimited time to strengthen our relationship and create positive memories together, she replied with an emotional wisdom that deeply moved me. As we planned our future destinations for the next 2 years, I felt a deep gratitude toward life for giving me a second chance to experience authentic happiness and family relationships based on genuine love instead of financial expectations. Henry's betrayal, paradoxically, had been the most valuable gift I could have received. My own liberation toward a full and authentic life, surrounded only by people who deserved my trust and affection. At 69, I had finally begun to truly live. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.